What messages do you try to present in your works?
One, I'm totally fascinated by human beings. I think that we are an interesting species, and just as we spend time studying what we call the lower mammals, and I'm not so sure they're lower, we need to spend a little more time studying ourselves. I think that it's very easy to forget that we need to take care of ourselves, that the care of the soul is an important thing. You've got to have a cosmic, I was talking about this evening, but one must have a cosmic patience with oneself.
Actually, there's quite a bit of covert racism going on, particularly in the political arena, code word messages and things like this. These kind of code word messages that politicians use, they're doing this to maintain control of the economics and maintain control of certain politicalized institutions that are also still racist. They hide the racism. But I would love to say this here. In the struggle of the 60s that Martin Luther King, SCLC, and other people struggled in, that the Black Panther Party was part of, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, all of us, many, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. There was a time in this country, the police brutality that you see and hear of today, there was a time in this country it was 10, 20 times worse than it is now. Doesn't mean that we're supposed to relax and say we're not going to get rid of this last 1 or 2% that's going on. Yes, we got to get rid of it. There was a time when people were getting killed, shot, murdered, and terrorized. Just in the 50s and the early 60s, they were getting shot, killed, murdered, and terrorized, and not one white racist policeman or whoever was even put on trial.
What makes this year so significant, beyond what I just said, is that we have now arrived at the point in Black America's history where we have a new generation that I belong to. We are the first generation of Black Americans in this country who are coming into positions of leadership and responsibility and authority who didn't live through the civil rights struggle. I mean, the black community has never, ever had leaders who were not born of the struggle, who were not born of the movement, born of segregation, et cetera, et cetera. And we are the first generation, to come into those positions of leadership in our community who don't have a first-hand perspective on what the struggle was all about.
And I do not like them, Sam, I do not like green eggs and ham. Would you like them here or there? I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam,
Talk about 1960, and I'll tell you something. Just as the election was decided that year in Illinois, I believe you all are going to decide this year's election by voting for Gore and Lieberman in Illinois and putting us over the top. Now, you're not going to suffer for lack of attention from us. In the last 2 weeks, I've been in Moline, Quincy, Chicago, and now Peoria.
We've got to recognize that when you lower standards and lower sights and lower expectations, children are going to be left behind. And that is unacceptable in America. It's unacceptable for a lot of reasons. It's unacceptable because as the economy changes, the danger is we can have a two-society America. And that is really unacceptable. It's unacceptable because our education system holds out such promise and hope. And yet low expectations diminishes that promise and hope. One of the reasons we picked this school, it's a school of children that in some people's minds are children who are supposed to fail. After all, they don't come from the best neighborhoods and the housing conditions aren't perfect. The mom was working as hard as she possibly can to get ahead. And I can't wait for you to hear the Tiffany story. But we believe something differently. The principal and I hope everybody else in this community of Peoria understands every child can learn. Every child can learn. It starts with raising people's sights and raising expectations and refusing to yield, refusing to accept a curriculum that won't work. And so one of the important points that will come out of this discussion is that there are some things that works when it comes to teaching children read and some that doesn't. And our society must focus on those curriculum that work. Phonics works. Phonemic awareness is incredibly important to making sure children learn to read. It is a fact. And one of my hopes, should I be fortunate enough to become the president, is to have a national reading program. $5 billion program, $1 billion a year to encourage reading, but starting with making sure that schools use the right kind of curriculum.
You know, the Senate is tough. It's a 50-50 situation there, but Cheney can always break it. But in most votes, you don't always have that kind of loyalty where all Democrats vote one way, all Republicans another way. Same thing with regards to the House, where I think the Democrats are about 7 votes short. So I think there's still room there for a lot of pressure by the Democratic Party. For example, Ashcroft's selection has been delayed. Everyone else has been accepted, but it's now been delayed for another week. So I don't see smooth sailing for Bush, but I think that there are some things that Bush may do for the African American community that we may be pleasantly pleased with. I think there's a mixed vote out there as relates to his desire for vouchers of $1,500. But I'm concerned about African American educators who send their children to private schools, and yet they don't want choice for low-income children. I'm real concerned about that inconsistency, and I think that we have to ask ourselves, are we making decisions that are in our best interest or in the best interest of the larger community?
Do you find that conspiracy still to be true?
Very much so. I think there's a relationship between Ritalin and cocaine, between special education and prison. When you and I first met, there were less than 100,000 African American males in prison. Now there are 1.3 million. For some reason in America, if you're in possession of 499 grams of cocaine, they'll give you a slap on the wrist and a homework assignment. But if you're in possession of 5 grams of the derivative, crack cocaine, it's a mandatory sentence. So 60% of the inmates that are in jail because of drug-related crimes.
There's been so many things that's held us down, but now it looks like things are finally coming around. I know we've got a long, long way to go, and where we'll end up, I don't know. But we won't let nothing hold us back. We're putting our show together, we're polishing up our act. And if you've ever been held down before, I know you refuse to be held down anymore. Well, don't you let nothing stand in your way.
Do you know who we are? PCCEO, helping people, changing lives for every stage of life.
Obviously, we were administering community action programs. And quite frankly, I think I was president of the State Association at the time, and there was a movement, the CAP movement, in terms of community action agencies, community action programs. And I always thought that we should put a caption under certain information. So CAPtions, the concept and the name all married together, and 35 years later we're still talking about captions.